Today is May 9th, 2020, and we are here with Mr. Keiji Asakura, who has very kindly offered us some time to speak with us about his experiences during COVID-19. And at this time, we have just opened up Houston a week, and it was 2 months after the initial start of the pandemic. So a lot of things have changed. So Mr. Asakura, what has changed for you in your daily life? Can you share with us?
Well, I spend most of the time at the house.
Mm-hmm.
My routine includes modest exercise, usually walk around the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
What's nice about that is that I got to know some of the neighbors that I haven't seen, little kids and teenagers even that I've never knew that they were they're in the neighborhood, so that's positive side. So because when you in these modern times, you hardly know your neighbors, and this time you begin to recognize your neighbors because they're also out walking around and riding bicycles and stuff like that. So that's been a very interesting discovery for me. And my wife and I, we just the two of us, we spend a great deal of time thinking about what to eat.
Yeah, that's very important.
It is important in a way that because we decided not to shop often because every time you go to the grocery store, it's quite an ordeal just to get the mask on and put gloves on and things like that. So and it seems like staying in line to get into the stores, and it's getting a little crazy. So we try to limit ourselves going to stores. So we have to really plan ahead about what you might want to eat in a week or 10 days. Spending more time with my wife, I think it's important. Another thing that changed as far as the routine wise is that I seem to work longer hours now because first of all, I'm not used to spending so much time in front of the computer, and all of a sudden I am. And I'm being invited to many of these Zoom meetings, one after another, sometimes two at the same time. And so I have to make sure one is muted and so on and so forth. It's a learning opportunity. But also because of this, I learned that communicating with overseas families and friends a little bit easier because they're also used to getting on the Zoom. So just a matter of adjusting the time. I have a daughter in England, so talking to her over a Zoom, or actually we communicate on a little app called WhatsApp, and then so are my friends in other places. So it is interesting. I wonder in the future, I think about how this experience of change, how we communicate. Those are some of the highlights of my daily routine experience in the last couple of months.
Sounds great.
I do miss traveling, however. I think going to places and seeing something, I kind of miss that part of it. I wish we could start doing that again.
Yeah, it definitely changes a lot of our habits. We are forced to use some technology more, which we're not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but
Right.
yeah. And thank you so much for responding to our survey in such details. I picked up that you mentioned you garden a lot these days.
Oh, I
Think,
forgot. Yeah, that too. We do um, yeah, growing some vegetables out there. We're making. We haven't gone to a garden stores. I do have a long list. Once I feel up to it, I'll probably go to the garden store and get some material. But doing a lot of yeah, cleanup work, a lot of pruning. Uh, I find it very satisfying to prune here and there. And we do have a gardener that comes every Thursday, and by the time he comes every Thursday, there's not a whole lot for him to do now.
you pick up new side jobs.
So, um, and then because it's a springtime, you have different things flowering. It is enjoyable. My morning routine is get a cup of coffee. I have a morning check-in with the rest of my colleagues at the office. So I usually sit outside and open up a computer and talk to them. And it's really refreshing to be able to do that outside and be in the garden.
Well, I've felt like you must be the one with the coolest background in the garden. And
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that, but we're, it is still enjoyable to see things change and flower. We might be locked up in the house, but seem like other species on Earth, this Earth is enjoying the spring and flowering and doing things. That's really it's a reassuring that nature happens around us regardless of what we're going through.
mm-hmm. And so how are some of the habitual changes? You said you definitely cook more, garden more, do some of the things that we used to outsource ourselves. Do you think these habits will stay in the longer run?
I don't know. That's a good question. Would they stay? I wish habit like walking the neighborhood and see and our neighbors doing the same. I wish that will continue.
Mm.
Um, always this sort of the time of these hardship, whether this coronavirus or the time of like we had Harvey hurricane. There's some thing that happens around you in the neighborhood and the communities that's really reassuring, like that, people really care about each other. And I know it happened after 9/11 and all these sort of things. I wish that will continue and then strengthen over time. But I know in the past when things got normal and everybody got busy and they get in the car and zip around everywhere, we tend to forget that again. But this is something that I wish the people would remember and stay connected. I think it's really important. So that's something that I wish.
Yeah, definitely. Would you mentioned about having the luxury of a garden? What would you feel like that inspired you about the relationship human beings have with the nature, for example?
Um,
Or let me rephrase this.
yeah,
Just
go ahead. Go ahead and rephrase.
just thinking how the pandemic in general will reflect about our relationship with the nature.
Well, there are a number of thoughts that I have about this. The one, I was just talking to a friend of mine this morning about, you know, this coronavirus threat will be temporary, it will be gone, but I said, well, I'm not really sure. As we look at an overall threat that we have, which is about the climate change and how the climate change changing rise of temperature globally shifts the sort of the natural system where animals and plants are threatened. You know, every single day we lose species, different species. Since 1970s, the 30% of the bird population has declined in America because of a loss of habitat, and largely to do with the human activity, but also with the climate change. The loss of the habitat comes with changing behaviors in the animal kingdom, and such that the relationship between people and the animal changes, and that's probably one of the reasons this transmission of the disease from the animal kingdom to us that caused this coronavirus. And I would say that could happen more often because of climate change, temperature rise, the loss of habitat. So I think that we have to be very cognizant about that. What would happen as frost in the Siberia start to melt in other places, and what happens to the unknown viruses and stuff like that that's locked in those permafrost as they melt and then perhaps get transmitted. What are some of the dangers in that? I mean, I would imagine there are lots of unknowns about what we don't know about our relationship with the nature today as the climate warms and changes. But still, you know, the nature, understanding of nature, I think it's really being outside and to know that there's nature all around, whether it's the pristine nature of big national parks or whatever, but even in an urban area, there is trees and birds, and there's the nature around us. That it's a recognition that we are part of the nature, and that we're not apart from the nature. And then if we were harming the nature, in a way, we're changing the nature from carbon emission or taking burning down the trees or if we harm nature, that it's going to harm us, and that certainly is the case here. And understanding the sustainable sort of the way in which we can coexist with the nature, I think it's really, really important. So, you know, I mean, there are a lot of thoughts about what's it going to be in the future when in the last 50 years or so, the trend's been that the population is being concentrated into the cities and urban areas, and now the urban areas are dangerous in the sense that these close relationships are you know, with urban vitality still continue to be the where you want to be, or is that going to change? How is that dynamics of all that change? I mean, I wonder about our relationship with our cities, and then also with nature. So obviously I don't have an answer for that.
A great answer. That it's very relational about many of the things that we should start thinking about, like the unfreezing of the Antarctica and the other continents. Tibetan was having some of the viruses in the frozen land that's been released. In any case, oh yeah.
Yeah, and then so between urban and rural relationship, where everybody came to urban areas in the last 50 years, and where the economic growth was sort of important. what we learned through this coronavirus and our relationships, and then use of technology, the digital technology such as the internet, how would a rural area change? You know, the political divide that happens in the United States or other areas between rural and urban, would this learned our behavior today would change that dynamics, and that dynamics also exists all over the world, whether it's in China or in Japan or in Africa, sort of the rural and urban population, that widening gap of inequity and income and all of that. Would this cause us to change where the rural lives are uplifted and then urban lives is changed and such that we still enjoy the urban life, but as we learn how to live in a closer kind of distance-wise, but still stay safe. We don't know. We don't know. We love our cities. We want some of that good things to continue, but maybe we learn something different and new behavior. The same with the rural area. Maybe we could spread the wealth in such a way that we recognize some of the good things about being in the rural area closer to nature. Who knows?
Yeah, it's very good thinking. So would you think after this pandemic, would more rural and more spread out cities like Houston or Texas in general will become, like, what kind of changes will we look forward to?
Well, obviously, you know, what we heard about New York City and Chicago and some of the denser cities and the issues with that. Even in Houston, we have a probably greater distance in statistics wise in the relationship between people, but I mean, it's still, um, it's not a rural kind of a density. Mm-hmm. Would Texas be better? I don't know what would make it safer for everybody. How we keep sort of creating the dynamics of the city life and even in less congested area. What's our options for transportation in a less crowded area? I mean, if we continue to rely on on the individual automobile, which is based on fossil fuel, well, that's not good. How can we save our investment in public transportation? How should the public transportation change in a way? Avoid close contact. I mean, all of those are big questions. Would we be able to change our behavior so that we respect other people's sort of the spaces? I don't know. I would not say whether Texas is better than New York or New York City is better than Houston. I really can't say that. But I'm just hoping that there is a greater way in diversifying where we live and how we live. Maybe that's the answer. Because that perhaps this technology, like we're on the Zoom conference, and as we learn to be able to behave like we have in the past in the cities through virtual means, maybe that would really open up options for us to be in a different places, but not physically separated, but we're still, you know, close together in ideas and thoughts. Maybe that's the answer. And then therefore, spreading sort of the wealth distribution more equally through rural and urban areas. You know, and that has to do with farming and agricultural production and the way we look at it. And those, we have a lot of issues about people who used to be able to make living in the rural areas, especially in south of border, like in Mexico or Central America, or even in South America, how those people lost their jobs because of the more of the industrialized farming that really reduces their income and then no longer be competitive, and they're forced to look for work in urban areas in a less than ideal environment. And some of them, of course, is subject to urban violence, and that's why they have to come to to make this long, dangerous trip to United States looking for jobs. All of that dynamics needs to be looked at as a part of the overall, and how we could really re-engineer our world in a way. It seems like to me, with all this, after this pandemic or during this thing, all of the governments and central banks all over are eager to spend the money to restart the economy, and they're making sure that everybody's employed. Huge amount of money being spent, and this is sort of the one time in our lifetime that this sort of a global effort is to get the economy going. I just hope that with that money, we're not just spending money for the sake of spending money, but we could spend the money to make sure that wealth is spread equally in a way. We could re-engineer our system in such that we provide more sustainable world, clean up our trash, so on and so forth, that we've been talking about for all these years, that maybe we could certainly apply our effort and money to do it right. It seemed like, at least I feel in that this is it. We just need to do this. We may not have this chance ever again, and we should, world needs to get together, not just the United States, but in Europe and Asia and Africa and South America. We all have to kind of get together and find a way. But then, unfortunately, there's this sort of the trend of a nationalist ideas, whether it's in the United States or in the Philippines or Hungary. I mean, all of that, those selfishness set aside, and I wish the world would get together and find solutions that will move us forward, because we may not have a second chance.
Wow. That's very inspiring to get us, moving. Like, I heard this saying a lot, that don't waste a single crisis. That there's something that can reveal about us and get us to do something. And that's definitely. You also mentioned that the kind of uprising of Asian American xenophobia and the racism, that we should do something about it. What do you think?
Right. It's this deep-seated racial tension. It's really, really sad, really sad. On one hand, Asians are considered as a model immigrant, but at the same time, us Asian could never be Americans. In other words, they always see us as a foreigner. Although, Asian history in America goes, nearly 150, close to 200 years of Asian history in America. Uh, no, actually, maybe, I don't know exactly 100, and you probably know better, from the middle of 19th century to now. So, yet people consider us as a foreigner in many ways, and that's really sad. How do we move forward? We do need to move forward. We need to have a recognition that this this country is a country of immigrants, that we have all kinds of people. We have all races, all colors represented. As they used to say, that this is a melting pot, but now we know that this is more like a mixed salad. It's and we want, well, yeah, melting pot means that everybody becomes same, but no, we're not the same. We have individuals, we have individual cultures, and we all celebrate. And they're mixed salad. Every bite of it is a tasty little thing, and we need to kind of enjoy that. And that makes us a very unique country with this union of diverse culture and people. And how do we move forward with that? On one hand, I could be hopeful, like when I see people walking in our neighborhood, I see all kinds of people. I'm hopeful that the future is like that. I'm hopeful for my own daughters and their generations, and how they see each other. But still, deep-seated racism is troubling me. Like just the most recently. I forgot which state it was, but this Black man was jogging through the neighborhood and he was shot by these two guys.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? I know there was a Singaporean man in London who was attacked by mobs. I mean, how do you see that? I don't know. I'm not a religious man, but gosh, we've been, this sort of the way that people judge each other in differences, that goes all over the place. I mean, I see that kind of a judgmental way, and people look at other people all over the world. These ethnic fighting in Africa, to these violences in Europe, and the long history of kind of fights and disagreement in Asia. I mean, gosh, did we have enough of this already? Can we just call it it? Just don't talk about, yes, knowing the history is important, but then don't hold any grudges. Let's start from today. I don't know. You think we can do that? Maybe that us human species are just not. I don't know. There was an interesting documentary I saw. In Ethiopia, there are two different types of monkeys. One that monkeys are vegetarians in large, and they don't fight with each other at all. And the other one, they fight constantly within the species. So which one do we get our DNA from? You wonder.
Right. Yeah, like talking about the habitual, we do see the people are having more preference on vegetarian food these days as well. Indeed. As the news came out from the meat factories.
Well, the industrial meat production is is something that we also have to look at and said, is this really sustainable? Is this something that we have to do? Is this about feeding or what? It's, you know, what are we eating? We, in the name of economy and efficiency, we just sacrifice certain aspect of the food that we eat and what it means to be part of the nature in terms of what we eat and what we need to thrive on. So maybe that's something that, you know, we need to think about. Yes, it's important that we can feed all the people in the world, but then maybe we need to look at that. You know, we need to really think about what we eat and how we grow those things. So yeah, I'm all for more vegetables. That's what my mother said, eat more vegetables.
Yep. Keeps you healthy and sane, I hope. Right. It's yeah, you were speaking about the more social justice in this crisis, as you also supported the homeless in getting them like the hygiene products and the food they need.
Right.
Can you share with us more about that?
So we are involved in a couple of organizations, and we support them both financially and different activities. So homelessness is something that we could do something about, whether about the affordable housing and economic wealth distribution, or about the mental illness in our society. And then both of those areas is something that we really, really need to improve in our society, just the way we build our cities and our homes and our systems are, and just a pure kind of our way we segregate, or we shy away from this mental illness itself is not good. It's a disease, just like cancer or anything else. The mental illness is something that we need to deal with. And then and then affordable housing is something that I'm really passionate about. How you provide affordable housing. But then root of all of that is really about the job security and income distribution, and eliminating poverty. I think that, you know, it's really crazy that rich people have so much wealth in this country, or in other countries as well, and that it seems to me that there is something went wrong in the way we structured our society and the way we envisioned our economy. Economic growth and the way the stock market grow, maybe that may be a good news, but increasing number of homelessness and the people on poverty, that's not a good news. That's not good news at all. I mean, we have to somehow see everybody in our society has equal opportunities to be able to live in a secure way. Healthcare, that's another thing that I don't understand in this country why there's so much resistance in people having the same access to the healthcare. We spend more money per capita on the healthcare, yet we're really way behind compared to other countries in providing the health security, food security, and all of that. as a small business owner, the single most biggest expense in our business next to payroll is providing for healthcare insurance. And when I know that our healthcare insurance cost is a lot higher than some of the bigger companies where they could really deal with a bigger pool of people, it as much as we talk about how the small companies that provide jobs in this country and employ more people, why is it not an even playing field? If I were in a different country where that sort of the healthcare is provided in a different way, that's one thing I don't have to worry about. I can concentrate on what I do as a businessman or what I do as a professional, rather than every year think about shop for the right insurance and then provide for our employees. To me, it's crazy to me. Because everybody needs good health care, everybody, not just this people or that people. It's not a choice in a way. And it seems like to me, just like a national security that the government provides, the health care, guaranteeing the health care is something the government should be able to do. So that's true with securing food security for all people and homes for everybody. And it seems like to me it's a collective responsibility all of us have. Yes, we talk about individual freedom in this country and the freedom, and we talk about freedom and freedom and freedom, but the other side of the freedom is this responsibility, the collective responsibility. In Asia, as a Confucius societies that we evolved under in China or Korea or Japan, emphasis is about collective responsibility. We're all together. So it's a little bit different. I wish maybe the blend of two is what is needed. We need to talk more about collective responsibilities. Responsibility among families, that's really, that's the respect for the others. That's what sort of the Asian philosophy is. And I wish maybe we need more of that here. Maybe that's our role as an Asian American, is to making sure that our family values that, again, I'm just stereotyping that. Maybe that's not the right thing to do, but all the sort of the ideas that us Asians kind of grow up in, maybe those are some of the ideas that we should really talk about more in this country. Maybe we should elect more Asian American politicians who could really talk about those issues in Washington, D.C. or our state legislature houses.
Yeah, definitely. We see those countries like Singapore, Taiwan with the more, and China too, the more collective mindset.
Yeah, it is more collective. A lot of Americans that sees that as a stifling socially, because there's too much control. There's Big Brother controlling everything. Well, that may be so. So we just have to strike a better balance between freedom of choice, but then we also collective responsibility that really equals to some equality in happiness. I think that's what it comes down to, is to be happy as an individual. We have a collective responsibility like taxes. That's something that we have to do as a citizen. We have to vote. Those are responsibilities that we fulfill. And then we need to define more responsibility as in the educations. We need to talk about that, just like what JFK, John F. Kennedy, talked about. He said, what he said is, of course, ask not what the government can do for you, but it's ask what you can do for government, meaning it's not all about handouts, but this is, the government is about us. It's the ideal that that the people has to contribute, and you know, that is the, you know, it's a little bit different than perhaps the Asian way of a collective responsibilities, but nonetheless, we need to all fulfill that. Maybe that's how the society gets better. I wish that would be, that's the direction we're heading.
So coming back to the more kind of micro relationships, how have the relationship between yourself and the society has changed? Like during quarantine, we are forced to share space like every moment with our loved ones. And you also mentioned that you have been meeting your neighbors more than before, and we are also connected by technology a bit more than before. So do you see that we're more connected as a human being, or we are the other way?
I don't know that more well connected or better connected today than before. I don't know. That's a hard one to know. It's certainly face to face, seeing people, shaking their hands, hugging. I mean, all of that is sort of part of the human nature. That's a necessity in how we construct social togetherness. So definitely that's missing. So, but maybe we learn to communicate. Like I said, now I talk to my friends overseas more now in that sense. So maybe we learned something here that we are better connected in a sense. I do worry, however, that connected in what sense that social media and I hear a lot about what would cure a virus, or you should do or you shouldn't do, and this sort of huge amount of misinformation that coming out and every day on the social media is really disturbing. Just like how social media has influenced our ideas about what's good and what's bad, and how our own visions about who your neighbors are, who your friends are. It's a really ugly side of that social media and connections that we made. I wish there are some better answers for that, because it really brings the really bad side of human nature, just like hating each other, creating enemies out of some small little things, rather than seeing us as a together. So that might be a outcome of a coronavirus after we have to deal with. Are we really together as a community, or are we apart because of these misinformations? So that would be, I mean, this is the election year. I guess we'll hear about it a little bit more as the country open up and some of these activities come up. I mean, you've seen those newses where everybody's punching each other over whether you wear a mask or not. I mean, how crazy is that? It's just, in Asia, everybody wear masks. It's. I've never seen anybody fighting over that. Yeah, we can wear a mask. We don't have to wear a mask. But we have a consideration for others, and that's why we wear masks. So again, maybe that root cause of it is this sort of the individual freedom versus what is the collective responsibility that's each an individual has to fulfill. I don't know, and how the social media fits into it. And I'm really afraid that all the news that's coming out, that the largely the victim of this coronavirus really exacerbates our deep-seated social problems of poverty, people who are more affected by the virus, people has to work in an environment that they are more exposed. And, we need to ask big, tough questions to ourselves. Is this really the society that we're making collectively as a larger whole? Or people are saying that, well, you know, my world is different, where they're just subdividing our world into small bits of pieces and said, you know, I don't care about what people do on that side or this side. Again, going back to what I said about climate change or this or that, this is I think that coming out of this is I feel like only in last chance that we can make a real big contribution to make it right. Kind of like what's her name out of Sweden? I forgot her name all of a sudden.
Starts with G, the little girl.
Yeah, well, she's not that little anymore, but you know, she Thunberg, yeah. I forgot her first name, not Greta, but anyway, she said that action is necessary. The right action is necessary. We had enough to talk about, but we have to come together as a world. So, yes, all the pettiness aside.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what you said regarding the fake news and the misinformation from social media, it seems like what we are experiencing, the information input, the feeding has kind of been one way through technology. And it's definitely sounding like one of the Black Mirror episodes that a lot of our mindset can be manipulated through technology.
Yeah. We're the victim of the technology, or are we going to use this technology to better our lives and become happier people?
Yeah, well, that's all of my questions so far. I was just wondering if you have anything you would like to share that I haven't touched.
As far as the Asian Americans are concerned, I think that, yeah, we should be more confident about our heritage. When I say confident, I don't mean that to force our heritage on others, but I think that we should be proud of our heritage. I say that's a better word for it. You know, we should contribute more to our society. Let's make our country, United States, this place, our community, Houston, a better place. Let's really contribute in a way we know how as a Asian American who has this really past learning and a culture that could bring a better unity for people in our city and in our country. I think that's our contribution that we could make. And we should assert that and say, you know, this is how we see it. And I think we should have more dialogues about that, for Asian American who you know, from Chinese exclusion law to the Japanese American interns in World War II. We have gone through lots of hardship. We know something about this, and we should really say that as a group of people, we stand for the freedom of people and ideas, but at the same time, we work hard to uphold our collective responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to say that out loud.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
so that we need to stand against wall in the southern border. We don't want to exclude people. We are all immigrants. We work very hard, and that there were times when we were segregated because we carried disease, and we and all of that sort of things. And we need to stand up and really voice our ideas that is not right. And I know that sometimes even in our communities there are differences. Somehow we forget history about what we went through as a group of people. And I think we need to really stand together and make our voices heard.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for your contribution to the Houston Asian American Archive and your effort in helping the homeless fight the coronavirus, and as one of your many contributions.
I'm just the one person,
Yep. Yeah, we hope the society will be better with many people like yourself. Great.
Thank you. Say hi to Anne. Ciao.
I will.
All right.